this, I'm joined by Elizabeth Shackleford, a former U.S. Department of State official and now senior fellow at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. It's great to get you on the program. I just want to get your thoughts on, is there anything at this point that international institutions like the UN and the IEA can do?
Well, I think that there's a lot that they need to be doing. The question as to how effective it's going to be is, of course, in the hands of people we don't control, like President Putin of Russia. But we need to continue to try and put multilateral pressure on Russia to allow inspectors in. We need to ensure that the UN puts those inspectors there as well. Russia's been claiming that the United Nations and the IAEA has been the block to bring them in due to security concerns. But I think that the diplomacy needs to continue because, quite frankly, there is not a palatable military solution to this current standoff. So we all need to, every country needs to do what it can to put pressure on Russia to pull back and allow some independent observers in and to demilitarize this area.
Elizabeth, how big is the risk right now, in your view, of some sort of accident happening at that Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, or something even worse?
Well, it's very hard to put it exactly into a measured terms there because it's hard to know exactly what's going on. But the longer that this continues and the longer that there is shelling happening in that vicinity, the higher the risks are that could be an accident. I think that the risks of anyone intentionally blowing up the plant is exceedingly low because the costs are so high to all sides and everyone. But the risks of an accident, of some form of radiation leakage or hydrogen leakage is getting higher by the sad truth is, though, that risk doesn't need to be very high for it to be exceedingly serious.
So where do we go from here, Elizabeth? How do you see this playing out?
Well, I think that we need to use all the diplomatic tools that we have at our disposal. That means, engaging through the United Nations, but also the United States has an opportunity to do kind of diplomacy 1 degree removed. We're not going to be able to do anything at this stage to persuade Putin or Russia directly. We just don't have that kind of leverage. And we've already kind of thrown a lot on the table in terms of the leverage that we have with sanctions and our military support to Ukraine. So at this stage, we need to look at who we have leverage over, who has some leverage or influence over Putin. I think there have been some indications that, China, for example, does not feel particularly comfortable with this situation either. And that's the kind of nation that could have influence on Putin. It needs to be a full court press by all nations who do not want to see a nuclear disaster.
As you've described, Elizabeth, we've had so many competing narratives up until this point. Is it possible to say who has the upper hand in the conflict right now?
I think that's very hard to say at this stage, and I'd hate to predict anything, but we do anticipate that this is going to continue to be long and drawn out. I think that morale is going to play a very big part. Seeing the vulnerabilities of Crimea, for example, with what's been happening this week, certainly isn't going to help Russian morale any, and it might really help boost Ukrainian morale. But it's going to be a question of who has the support, the materials that they need to continue for the longest period of time, unfortunately. So I think we're dug in for a long conflict.
Elizabeth Shackleford there, thank you so much for joining us on the program, former U.S. Department of State official.